Oh, I didn't introduce him, this is Bob Hammond.
Yeah, I'm Bob Hammond. I'm out of the California clan, and it's really a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for that wonderful lunch, and your hospitality is outstanding. I recommend you to the next group coming in here. But it's wonderful. It really is very nice. I got into this subject because I was updating the digital version of this particular booklet by Johnny Ribbens. And as I was updating it, you all came out with, here's what the theme of this conference is going to be. And I got all excited because I thought, this is exactly what this is about. So that's how we got that on here. Some of this you're going to find a bit similar to what the others are, and maybe that's okay, as long as we don't go too far. Repetition in this arena is not bad because it will help us retain the learning. My brother was in the motivation business for years, and they always said you had to repeat something 6 times before it would finally sink in. And even then, you had to go back and repeat it after about 6 months. So anyway, this is a booklet that Johnny Ribbens wrote. Johnny always called a spade a spade. He didn't beat around the bush. Sometimes he was a little rough. And even here he was a little, but he was after the truth. That was his central theme throughout his life. And I love Johnny. There he is with Mildred and Otis. Did anybody know Johnny Ribbens? Besides me? Yeah, and Jane? Yeah, okay, you did. Okay, a few of us. Oh, there's Ralph. Sorry, Ralph, didn't miss you. Anyway, he was a super fellow. And of course, we know who else was on that picture. That Mildred was sure a beautiful woman. A little bit about Johnny. He attended the Gospel Fellowship in Grand Rapids. His mother and father, Neil and Sarah and Neil, did also, along with my parents, Milt and Anna Hammond, Milt Sr. And that's where my brother got into this also. And so the Hammond boys have been part of this ministry ever since I can remember. I was a little guy, wasn't I, Jane?
Cute little kid.
See, she always says that. Somewhere or other, the cuteness went someplace. It didn't stick. But anyway, they were there, and my uncle Jake Vanderbregen and his daughters, and I thought maybe I might have one of his daughters here, i.e. my cousins. They weren't able to make it out of Grand Rapids. They were going to a ministry, and they ended up with Dr. DeHaan. Anybody know him? Yeah, that's he's pretty well, he was on the radio a lot. In fact, Dr. DeHaan married my folks. I didn't even know that till last week. Anyway, Johnny attended the Gospel Fellowship in Grand Rapids. He joined the Navy. He went to San Diego. And he then moved up out of the Navy. He moved up to LA. By that time, Otis had come to Los Angeles. And Johnny became one of the original students of the Pacific Bible Institute that Otis had envisioned shaping up and building an institute of Bible students studying the Bible as it's so stated. Have I lost you?
No, you go, keep on.
Keep going.
Okay. Now Otis couldn't keep up with this, unfortunately, because people had to make a living. They couldn't devote all their life to that, and so that kind of couldn't couldn't keep going. And so the Word of Truth ministry he converted his activities and his focus on the Word of Truth ministries and had to abandon the Bible Institute approach. Now this booklet that Johnny wrote, he started out, he said, let's examine the major events of the first 25 centuries. I'm not going to debate the 25 centuries. There's a lot of people that date this sort of stuff. I'm not going to get into it. But we're going to examine this from the standpoint of the subject of death. Death. And what we're going to do now today, we've got a PowerPoint presentation, high tech. It's not so high tech anymore, but it progressively is supposed to reveal the subject that you're trying to get across. So that's our PowerPoint presentation. We'll see how it does. It might be our last PowerPoint presentation, but that's all right. We'll just do what we got to do. First thing the Bible teaches us about death, of course, was the original sin, as we've discussed earlier, and we're going to discuss some of this again. That particular event was a death sentence to all of us. Let's face it, that's all it is. That's a death sentence. We are alive and dying because of that. Before that, mankind was alive and living, not dying. And what a difference, huh? What a difference. There's another element here in this original sin. This was Adam's first sin, and it was Satan's first lie. Thou shalt not die is something you're going to hear a few more times here in this discussion, and you've heard it already a few times, and that's good, I believe. We need to have that one drilled into us, because a lot of this problem that we see today started right there. Started with Satan's lie. And we got to put it where it belongs. The second great thing that Johnny has in his booklet was the great deluge of Noah's time. The Lord looked on the earth, and behold, it was corrupt. Corrupt isn't just evil, it's corrupt. From one end to the other, except for Noah's family. And this sort of thing, the Lord must have been quite angry to do what he did, and did it again too. So what we're dealing with are fallen angels that came down and corrupted the earth and corrupted everybody except Noah's family. Another major event of that time. And then Sodom and Gomorrah comes along. And this is where wicked angels and wicked people, they observed real angels coming down, and they were residing with Lot and his wife, and they surrounded Lot's home. You all recall this story? And they wanted the real angels to come out because they wanted to have sex with them. Can you imagine that? I mean, we're talking an evil time. Some of this kind of reminds you of today, except these are angels. And Lot even offered his own virgin daughters to them instead, and they didn't want that. They wanted the angels. What a terrible thing that they were facing. So God ordered Lot and his wife to leave, and we know he told her not to turn around, don't look back, and she did. And so Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed in their utter totality. And I think this morning you said there wasn't anything left. That's right, nothing left. But the world was pretty bad back then, when you started to see that kind of evil dwelling on top of everybody, except Lot and his family. Then Johnny put one more in this grouping, which I thought was interesting, the Mosaic Law. And he put that in there. It had a lot of the Mosaic Law. Can you hear me all right? Okay. A lot of the Mosaic Law had the penalty of death with it if you violated the law. The Mosaic Law was not an easy law to live to. And a lot of people didn't live to it. A lot of them tried and tried hard. But the Mosaic Law was a very difficult time for the nation of Israel. And a lot died because they fell far short of that law. Now, there's one thing that all of these events have in common. besides death. And it was brought out earlier in the last presentation. You never saw the words everlasting punishment, and they're not there. There wasn't such a thing mentioned in the Old Testament as everlasting punishment, which tells you something. It wasn't there. It was, that's an invention that mankind has had to do, and we'll get into that as we go through this. But no mention of everlasting punishment. Plenty of mention of death. Now, Ribbens could have ended his booklet right there and had a very short booklet, in my opinion, because the case against eternal torment was made by the very absence of the term eternal conscious torment or torment, just death. But we've looked at Romans 3:23. We must all experience the first death first. The principle is all have sinned and fallen short. And we, therefore, must go from alive and dying before we can go back to a condition of alive and living. One day, God will annul this principle. We know that. We hope for that. We pray for that. He'll infuse life into this world as opposed to death. Life. But death isn't going to go away on us. We're going to see it. We're going to observe it. We may even have to live it again. This is one, I'm not going to steal Andy's thunder on this because he's going to be describing a lot of this. We're depending on you, Andy, for a lot of stuff here. But Sheol and Hades being mainly grave and pit, this isn't the only words, but these are the main words. And I bring up this term Gehenna because that has interpreted hell, the word hell has been Gehenna. Otis has a special study 16 on this subject, and the word hell, as he's using it, is the word destruction. Hell means destruction, not just someone's going to live someplace for the rest of whatever it is, but he's going to be destroyed. And we know that this destruction of Gehenna is the trash dump of the Valley of Hinnom. We know that, right? Which is where all the trash out of Jerusalem was burnt, and it was always burning. It burnt all the time. And it represented the ultimate destruction of something that the Jews would throw away. When a Jew threw something away, it wasn't worth anything anyway, because they used whatever they had, they used it right to the end. They might have some string, and that was it, and the way it went. But Gehenna, meaning destruction, has a big meaning in this term now, as we know as death, but not torment. It's destruction. Now I can go forward here, fast forward about five dispensations, and we see what's going on even today. And this is a Billy Graham quote, and I'm not trying to knock Billy Graham, but I just got to share this. And this is out of the booklet, incidentally. It's not out of me. When an unbeliever dies, his spirit goes to hell, a place of eternal separation from God. Well, what does that mean, eternal separation from God? I think that's a politically correct way of saying that you're going to hell. but you're conscious. The key to this statement is that an individual who's gone to hell, an unbeliever, is conscious. So therefore he goes to hell, he's conscious. The converse, of course, is true too. If you go to a believer dies, he goes to heaven. Well, he's conscious also, right? When you get all said and done, what do you need resurrection for? I mean, you're alive when you're going to heaven. You're alive when you're going to hell. Now, there's a middle ground in there somewhere where people aren't sure what he is he saved or not? And they'll leave that up to the Lord to decide, which is probably the only real truth in this whole thing, is that the Lord will decide. The point is there any need for resurrection if this is all true? So here we are again. We said we've had these Greek philosophers, namely Plato being the worst, or excuse me, the loudest, and that they began this satanic lie. Well, they didn't begin it. Satan began it. He started it all out. Thou shalt not surely die. Here you hear it again. Yes, it's this goes way back, and Plato just, I guess it's. I think we're dealing with a situation, and Gwen has a bit of this, and we talked at lunch, and so do I. When you lose your loved one, it would feel so good if you thought at all that this loved one wasn't really dead, was really in heaven, and you could talk with him in your sleep or whatever. It feels good, and it does. I've had the same thing in me, but it's wrong. It's not true. When you're dead, you're dead. We'll get into that. Whenever I look at this sort of thing, I remember Matthew 10. It says, "Fear not him which kill the body, but are not able to kill the soul." And that's a translational thing, should be spirit. "But rather fear him which is able to destroy both the spirit and the body in Gehenna." In other words, the day that the Lord throws, well, we know the body's going back to the ground. The day the Lord throws the spirit into Gehenna, it's useless. It's gone. And that's the second death. And then fear him who can do that, and that's right, fear him. And any other fear, anybody else going to threaten you with your life, they can't kill your spirit. So don't fear them. This undying soul continued on into the Pharisees, provided a lot of hope to the common people, and I might add a little fear, because if you want to have a good congregation of people that are staying together with you, you got to have the proper amount of fear, or you might lose it. You don't want to do that. This is where the old fire and brimstone teachers back in the 20s came from. They taught fear. They'd scare everybody half to death, right? When you were kids, you probably heard this, and some of these tent preachers that used to go around the country had a good gab that they could tell you had to do this, or you'd be going to fire and brimstone death. I always remember that movie Elmer Gantry that was out years ago, and he was a good fire and brimstone teacher. But you cannot ever play fear down, because that has been a major motivator, let's put it that way. Then the Roman Catholic Church comes in, adding a new term called purgatory to their lexicon, because they never quite knew what to do with the person in the middle. He wasn't saved, and they didn't know if he was unsaved. They just didn't know. Then there's another term called limbo. And Jane had to remind me of that. I never even heard of limbo. Have you? You do. Yeah, I somehow or other that went by me. But that's for children, right? That's for little children that have been lost. But I don't want to also just pick on the Roman Catholic Church, because there's a lot of evangelism going on today that we see, and they believe they're in heaven. It's the same stuff. They believe they're in heaven. No one talks about hell. It's funny. Nobody seems to go to hell anymore. The world, I guess, maybe is a little more politically correct, or the standards of heaven have gone down. I'm not sure which it is. And there's a lot of non-Christian beliefs that also are in a heaven or of some sort, nirvana or some other thing. So this feeling of people wanting to say people that you don't die is something that I think is just kind of innate in people's minds and hearts because they don't want their loved one to think of them as dead. It's just as too hard of a thing to think about. And what I said is what I'm saying here again. Satan's lie. And all I can say to that is that we're going to just always remember that. If you remember nothing else from what I've just said, remember that. Thou shalt not surely die. The lie. Alive and well today, and probably healthier now than ever. But what does the Bible say? The Bible says in Ecclesiastes, at the moment of death, then shall the dust return to the earth as it was, and the spirit shall return to God who gave it. I.e. believers and unbelievers, as you so aptly put it earlier, Nathan. We're all going to be raised. The unbelievers are going to be raised, and what a terrible thing that's going to be, because then they're going to find out they're not part of this future. And that, if you're raised with a life that's not dying, wouldn't that be a terrible thing to lose? Goodness. Because you're not going anywhere except Gehenna. Is that me? Oh, okay. So, the principles we live with today, we must all die at least once, with the expectation of resurrection and life. We know that, and I said at least once, in the premillennial kingdom, we know there's a time at which God's restraints are going to be withdrawn even during the kingdom period. And man is going to take over again, and wickedness is going to rule, and tribulations are going to happen. That's in the future, and we know that. And people are going to have a stamp on their forehead or their hand or something, or they aren't even going to be able to eat, take care of their families. There's going to be another death, and people may be resurrected and then die again because they may become martyrs. But his actions, as we're going on now, is that they will be deferred until this kingdom period. And we know that, we look forward to that, because during this particular age of dispensation of grace, he's not acting in this mode. When he does take actions, we have Jesus Christ as our advocate, and we will be resurrected to life undying in the kingdom. Undying doesn't mean immortal. I don't think we mean immortal, but that's a subject we can debate. It means that we're not dying, but it doesn't mean that we can't die. All God's got to do, and this is Ananias and Sapphira as an example, all we'd have to do is do something against God's direction, and we could die right there. Take the breath away and we're dead. That doesn't mean we're in the lake of fire. That means we're dead. And when the kingdom is renewed with God's Jesus Christ's personal presence then coming to this earth, the martyrs of that period of time will come back first. Well, we know then the unknowledgeable will be judged, and those rejecting Christ will experience the second death, i.e. Gehenna. Their spirit will be burnt, and there will be no more memory of them. That's a sad state, but that's the truth, I think. And I personally don't believe God's going to torment anybody. It's going to be burning of the spirit, and that's it. They're gone. Which is more in keeping with God's person. He's not a killer. He's not out after retribution. He knows what his judgment is, and it'll be done. I had to end this somehow because Johnny's book kind of just ends. And I just put down a couple things that when you get right down to it are the basics of our belief, and that is, one, to be active believers in our Lord Jesus Christ. Active believers. This group is, and it's just a fun group to talk with in the sense that I'm talking to a group of believers, and it's wonderful. And then I think the second thing is approach our own mortality with the confidence of resurrection. What are we to fear? Death? No. I don't fear death. I must admit, I'm much more aware of death at this point. But I think many of you are too, so that's part of life. Now this was rather fast. I think I saved a little time. Did I?
2 minutes.
That's 2 minutes. Well, that wasn't too bad.
You have 7 or 8 minutes for questions.
Okay, well, that is my presentation, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for your attention. I had the afternoon shift after lunch. That's usually the killer. But I didn't see too many eyes closed. I almost got you, Bob, but then you woke up. So anyway, thank you very much.
If anybody wants to read Johnny's book, because you are raving about Johnny's book, how can they do that?
Well, the way to get to Johnny's book is to get to seedandbread.org onto that website. Then look for the More Special Studies. MSS is the number, and he's number 12, I believe. And all of his other books are there, as well as we got Otis's, we got all kinds of stuff on there. It took us about 6 years to digitize all this. But it's there, and it's there for free, so it's not going to cost you anything. And I think you would enjoy looking for it, and I certainly do recommend it. Thanks, Gene. Good point. Any other commentary or questions?
Did you repeat that book again, please?
Yeah, the name of this book is Everlasting Punishment. By John Ribbens. It's MSS 12.
It says 09 here.
Excuse me, MSS 09. I've done this so often I forgot the numbers. The MSS means More Special Studies. SS Special Studies are all of Otis's studies. So we had to separate them just so we'd know the author's differences. Okay?
I told this to Bob personally, but he has been a big person in getting this all on the website, and we have been really blessed by the work that he's done.
Well, that's been a labor of love. I used to go in there after dinner, and my wife said, "What are you doing?" And I said, I'm working on the computer. And I do that every night. And she said, "Come out here and visit me. I'm missing you." You know? I did. We did all right. Thank you very much, y'all.